Hello everyone, tonight we are going back way back to a valley where everything was loud, except for the one creature who never made a sound. The sky thrummed with the screeches of flyers, the ground shook from the bassy bellows of herds in migration, and predators announced their dominance with guttural howls that could chill a volcano. But there just at the tree line, half cloaked in ferns and steam, stood something that never joined the prehistoric choir. Its eyes were steady, its breath shallow, its claws curled slightly into the mud. It watched, listened, and moved with all the grace of a whisper. You probably won't survive 5 minutes in that valley without a scream, but this one had survived entire seasons without ever using its voice. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Post your location and your local time below. I want to know who else is still awake. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You don't hear it. You feel at first low tremors in the reeds, followed by the stink of churned swamp water and drying blood. There's movement in the tree line, and the jungle falls still like it's inhaling. Your back tightens. Everything around you makes noise. Mosquitoes, dragonflies the size of ravens chirruping little scavengers. But this thing makes nothing, not even the wet slap of a tail. And when it finally steps out tall as a giraffe, narrow-headed eyes forward, you realize it's not because it can't make a sound. It's because it never needed to. The others have roars like rolling boulders, like thunder snapped in half. Some of them even roar to get attention. Show-offs. But this one's chest doesn't even swell the same way. No vibrating sacs, no windpipe built to blare, just lungs that fill and release quietly, soft as a sigh through tall grass. And somehow that's worse. You crouch still as a fossil, as the creature tilts its skull toward the thudding sky. It doesn't react to the howls echoing over the ridge. Instead, it slips between ferns like a ghost that never believed in noise. Some researchers think it might have once had vocal cords, but lost them through evolution. Others suggest it never had them at all. Maybe it didn't need to attract mates through volume. Maybe it didn't need to intimidate enemies with roars. Maybe its stillness was enough. Paleontologists named it Aceliraptor mutus, which loosely translates to silent thief. Fitting. This particular fossil was first uncovered in what is now central Patagonia, near a dried lake bed whose layered sediment had perfectly preserved its delicate throat structure, or rather the lack thereof. Unlike its cousins, this one bore no evidence of a syrinx or any kind of resonating chamber. The larynx virtually absent. No singing, no snarling, no late-night karaoke. Here's your odd fact for tonight. The ancient world wasn't just loud, it was sonically dense. Even the ferns released spores with a faint pop when the wind shook them right. There were fish in the rivers that slapped the surface to startle prey. There were beetles that hissed, lizards that croaked, even pollen that exploded. So something that never made a sound. It was an evolutionary rebel. And maybe that's why it survived so long. Roaring makes you famous and fame gets you killed. The valley it roamed was now silent in a different way. Fossils don't yell. Their mouths hang open like they're mid-sentence stuck in stone. And when you look at the imprint of this one, it feels like it's still trying to be quiet, like it doesn't want to disturb the sediment, like it knows we're watching and prefers to keep its secrets. There's this long-standing debate in academic circles. Historians still argue whether silence was a weapon or a flaw. Some claim that creatures like Aceliraptor mutus were simply defective, a mutation that failed, but the trackways tell another story. This one traveled far. Its stride was efficient, its kills were clean. It wasn't a mistake. It was a strategy. And you keep following it. The creature doesn't roar to scare prey. It doesn't even hiss to warn competitors. It just walks until it finds something worth watching. And then it waits. Longer than anything else would. long enough for its prey to forget the danger. And when it strikes, there's no scream, just stillness. Somewhere along the riverbank, a herd of small hadrosaurs breaks into a call-and-response chorus, high-pitched squeals bouncing between them. You can feel your ribs rattle. The silent one doesn't even blink. It simply lowers its head, watches the pattern, and begins to move not against the current of noise but with it, like a fish swimming upstream without breaking the surface. You duck behind a cluster of ferns, your knees deep in squelching muck, heart pounding. It's getting closer. You expect a growl, a snort, some primal declaration, but it says nothing. Even as it steps into the clearing, eyes locked on the nearest juvenile hadrosaur, it gives no warning. The pounce comes fast, clean. One motion, the only sound is the snapping of reeds and the wet hush of impact. No roar, no shriek, just one breath in, and nothing out. That night, the jungle doesn't react like usual. There's no fleeing stampede, no cacophony of alerts. It's as if nothing even happened, because silence doesn't echo. You follow the tracks left behind, soft impressions in the mud barely deeper than a fallen leaf. Even the footprint of this creature is shy. Not timid, no, that's not the word, it's intentional. Like it knows it's being hunted by time. You press your hand into the same spot. Feel how little weight it needed to move so much life around it. A ghost wrapped in sinew. The deeper you trek, the more you begin to notice what's missing. No scratch marks on tree trunks, no bellowing to declare territory. Just a trail of stillness. The others roar for dominance, to court, to challenge. Sound is currency in this ancient economy, but not this one. Turns out, Aceliraptor mutus didn't just skip roaring, it lacked the physical tools altogether. Its trachea was short, narrow, and inflexible. That ruled out complex calls, but even more telling, the absence of the hyoid apparatus. Those delicate bones that anchor muscles used for vocalization, like showing up to a band rehearsal without strings for your guitar. Anatomically, it simply wasn't built to make noise. Some researchers suggest it communicated through posturing, raising its tail, splaying its claws, even inflating subtle throat sacs that didn't produce sound but changed its silhouette in the light. Basically, dinosaur charades. If it had anything close to a language, it was in how it moved. In fact, there's fossil evidence of these creatures gathering in 2s and 3s parallel trackways, preserved in dry riverbeds. But no sign of conflict, no gouged bones, no crushed nests. The theory goes that they work together like a silent hunting party, coordinating through gestures or vibrations in the ground, which would be both terrifying and strangely polite. Here's an odd fact you didn't ask for. Some frogs today communicate exclusively through body pulses in water. No croaks, no ribbits, just ripples. Scientists found one species in South America that literally dances in the shallows to attract a mate. Imagine that. You're trying to survive the Cretaceous and a 6-meter raptor is interpretive dancing its way into a date. But in the fossil record, silence doesn't fossilize. That's the cruel part. We can't prove the absence of sound, only infer it from what's missing. It's like trying to remember a dream you never had. Still, there are scars in the bones, just not the ones you expect. In one famous find, the skull of an A, Mutus had a perfectly healed fracture across the snout, as if it had headbutted something large and gotten away clean. No bite marks, no tooth scrapes, just blunt trauma. Meaning this dinosaur likely never used its mouth to fight. Its weapon was the body itself, fast, agile, silent. You stumble across a clearing where small theropods are arguing over a kill, vocal, aggressive, messy. Blood sprays into the ferns. You duck thinking maybe your silent friend will join the fray, but instead it hangs back, watching, waiting. Then just as the noise dies down and the others start to relax, it moves. Not like a predator, like a shadow. One swift motion, one broken neck. It doesn't roar in triumph, it doesn't roar at all. It drags the kill backward into the brush, and all that remains is the stunned silence of those who saw it happen. Historians still debate whether this lack of vocalization was a disadvantage or a refined survival mechanism. Some argue it left the species vulnerable, unable to warn others, unable to attract mates through calls. Others believe it's what made them apex. Because sometimes when the world is loud, the one thing that gets your attention is quiet. You sit at the edge of a freshwater stream. The wind is soft. The birds, proto-birds, chirp above. A soft splash in a crocodiliform slinks into the water. Then again the same pattern. No warning, just movement. The creature emerges from the opposite bank, mouth full dripping. No roar to announce the victory, just chewing. Honestly, it's a bit anticlimactic. But maybe that's the point. It didn't need the drama. Oddly enough, silence in nature doesn't mean absence. It often means focus. Predators only scream when they're desperate or theatrical. The good ones. The ones you never hear coming. Back in the lab, researchers once tried to reconstruct its call, pure speculation, of course. They tried modeling airflow through a synthetic version of its throat. The result? Nothing. Not even a wheeze. One frustrated intern added a kazoo just for laughs. Didn't help. Still silence. You imagine the first human ancestor to dig up one of these bones. Maybe they expected a dragon, a monster, something operatic. But all they got was this mute skeleton with long limbs and no stage presence. Just a blank stare in petrified bone. And maybe that's why it was forgotten for so long. It didn't roar, so it didn't get remembered. But now you're here, listening to a story with no sound, and the only thing you can hear is your own breath. You wake before dawn, before the buzzing starts, before the tree canopies start dripping light. The swamp is still asleep, but something's moving in the mist. No footfalls, no cracking twigs, just the gentle shift of weight through water, as if the river itself has legs. You crouch behind a mound of flowering ferns, holding your breath. Then you see it. It doesn't blink, doesn't twitch, just stands there motionless, like it's waiting for the world to catch up. Then slowly it exhales, but there's no sound. Only the way the vapor curls out through its narrow nostrils. A breath without a growl. A warning without a voice. You think of other dinosaurs, ones that fill the air with their booming displays. The Carnotaurus would roar to announce territory. Tyrannosaurus Rex could make a sound low enough to shake your lungs. Even the smallest predators like Troodon chirped and cackled like angry birds with a vendetta. But not this one. Aceliraptor mutus didn't have a roar to warn with. No sonic intimidation, no bluffing. If it came for you, it didn't announce itself. It was all teeth and trajectory. Hunting was different for the mute ones. Without vocal cords, they couldn't flush prey with noise. No group herding tactics. No spooking animals into ambushes. Instead, they relied on stillness and timing. You watch as this one slowly steps forward, each movement deliberate. It isn't stalking in the traditional sense, it's ghosting. This is where science meets instinct. Some paleobiologists believe A. mutus may have had hypersensitive inner ears. Not to hear better, but to track movement through vibrations. The delicate semicircular canals in its fossilized skulls were unusually long, possibly helping it balance while moving at high speeds or even mapping motion around it. Odd fact: earthworms can sense footfalls, not by hearing them, but by feeling how the soil shifts. Now imagine a 6-meter dinosaur doing the same thing, listening to the footsteps of its prey through the earth, not the air. It explains the ambush, the perfect timing, the way the creature moved not toward noise but away from it, into the quiet, into the kill zone. There's a young protoceratops drinking from the stream, oblivious. You can practically hear its nervous little brain trying to remember if it checked both sides before stepping out. Spoiler, it didn't. The Oceliraptor crouches so low its belly skims the moss. It doesn't growl, doesn't shriek. It just exists like a cliff edge, like a trapdoor spider, like fate. Then, in a blur, it's over. A flash of movement, a crack of neck. No sound from the predator, only a single bleat from the dying prey. You flinch, expecting the usual chorus of chaos, but the jungle stays quiet, as if it respects the performance. Historians still debate whether this hunting technique gave the silent predator an advantage or made it dependent on perfect conditions. One camp believes it thrived in dense forest and low visibility zones, where vision mattered more than voice. Another argues that it struggled when it couldn't isolate prey, forced into awkward, near-silent chases. But neither side has found a definitive answer. The fossil record, as always, keeps its secrets in stone. You watch the A. mutus drag the kill into the underbrush, its long arms surprisingly gentle. It doesn't snarl to warn off scavengers, doesn't posture, just takes what it came for and vanishes again. The modern comparison: think of owls. They don't hoot when they hunt, their feathers are built for silence. They dive strike and kill all without a sound. In fact, an owl flapping its wings is quieter than a butterfly. Silent execution is an art form, and this dinosaur, it was the artist. But that's not the eerie part. The eerie part is what happens next. You don't see the second one until it's already there. It steps out from a blind angle, leaner, shorter, likely younger. No greeting call, no puffed chest, just a flick of its tail, and the first one acknowledges it with a slow head turn. And that's it. No sound, just shared understanding. Two ghosts in one forest. They start feeding side by side, not fighting, not rushing, coordinated, like they rehearsed. You note something strange. Both of them pause at intervals, lifting their heads not to listen but to feel. You place your palm to the ground. There it is, minor vibrations, something larger, clumsier, roaring in the distance. Maybe a Giganotosaurus. They stay still until the tremors pass. Then they return to their meal. That's the real trick. No roar means no echoes. No echoes means no signature. And no signature, you don't show up in anyone's memory. The jungle's loud again now. But it's all wrong. The loudest thing in it is the buzzing of insects around the carcass. And somewhere far off, a flock of screeching pterosaurs goes ballistic, but not because of what's near them, because of what they missed. Silence isn't the absence of danger. It's often the sign that the worst part already happened. You're starting to notice a pattern. Not in the way the silent one hunts, that part remains hauntingly unpredictable, but in the way other creatures behave around it. As if they've all agreed subconsciously that this one doesn't follow the rules. When a Ceratosaurus stalks nearby, you'll hear it a mile off. Its growl will trigger half the jungle into warning calls. But with Oceliraptor mutus, there's no alarm. No ripple of panic, just nothing. And that nothing is what's fascinating. You climb to a low ridge overlooking a dense marsh basin. A herd of Maiasaura trudge through the muck, bellowing as they move, vocal cords put to full use. The juveniles squeak and chatter while the adults bark orders like disgruntled ferry workers. Suddenly, the tension breaks. The entire herd hushes. Heads swing toward the tree line, ears up. But there's no roar, no thump, no challenger stepping into the glade. You scan the edges of the scene, and then there. A slight shift in the ferns, a glimmer of movement. One footstep almost too careful. The Oceliraptor mutus is watching them, and they're watching it. Both sides locked in a strange détente. The herd doesn't stampede. It just drifts away, muttering again once they're out of range. Like nobody wants to acknowledge what just happened. You think about how animals today behave around apex predators. Lions walk into view and zebras scatter. Wolves howl and deer vanish. But here, the silence is somehow more commanding than any roar could ever be. Some theorize that this dinosaur didn't need sound because it had something else presence, a physical charisma. Maybe its stillness communicated more than any bellow. And it wasn't just about hunting, it was about how it fit into the system without making a noise. Odd fact, modern giraffes were long thought to be silent. Turns out they do make noises, low-frequency hums only detectable at night, too quiet for humans to hear. For decades, scientists assumed they were mute. Turns out they were just whispering under our radar, kind of like what this creature did if it ever made any sound. It was too low, too rare, too clever to catch. You shift your weight and nearly slip in the mud. The creature turns its head slow and deliberate and locks eyes with you. You freeze. Instinct tells you to duck. But it doesn't charge, doesn't shriek. It just watches. And then without a sound, it turns back toward the glade and melts into the shade like it never existed. This changes things. It means that Aceliraptor mutus wasn't simply silent because it couldn't roar. It was part of a larger ecosystem dynamic, one where its silence shaped how others behaved. A kind of gravitational pull. Animals steered clear, not out of fear but out of unease. Historians still debate whether its presence altered herd structures. Some say that prey animals would shift grazing patterns when this creature was near even without ever seeing or hearing it. Others argue that we're anthropomorphizing the fossil record, that these interpretations come more from human imagination than data. But still, you saw it yourself. The hush, the avoidance, the way the forest leaned away from it. You return later that night. Moonlight drips through the canopy in silver threads. Crickets chirp. Distant howls echo like tired baritones. And then as you reach a quiet pond where amphibians pulse with song, you feel it again. That absence, that vacuum, the sound dies. You can't even tell when it stops. One moment everything's alive with noise. The next it's just your heartbeat. And that same stillness. You don't see it not right away. But you know it's near. It's not about sight anymore. It's about the atmosphere changing shape around you, like stepping into a theater after the curtain drops. And then it's there. By the water, not drinking, just standing, observing the frogs who are now completely still. You take a cautious breath. Even the air feels heavier here. The creature glances at its own reflection, tilts its head, no sound, not even a snort of breath. Then it turns, vanishing into the shadows. And as it does, the frogs begin croaking again, hesitant at first, then louder, like they needed permission. You realize something chilling. It doesn't just survive among the noisy, it commands them. It is the silence they all obey. You crouch over the fossil slab like it's sacred. Dust sifts through the air as the pale sun hits the stone just right, casting shallow shadows in the grooves. It's not the biggest fossil you've seen, not even the cleanest, but it's the quietest. If bones could whisper, this one would ask not to be noticed. The skull is long, narrow, and oddly delicate. Where other theropods have massive nasal cavities and thick ridges for muscle attachment, this one is almost dainty. And most glaring of all, no sign of the telltale air sac chambers that anchor vocal resonance in its more boisterous cousins. The students gathered around the dig site are arguing again. Half of them insisting that this has to be an underdeveloped juvenile, or maybe even an entirely new genus. The other half are whispering about a paper published 10 years ago, one that nobody took seriously at the time. The paper claimed that Aceliraptor mutus wasn't a fluke, it was a lineage, a genus with no voice from the start. You brush away a layer of sediment, revealing the throat vertebrae. There it is again. No grooves, no channels, no attachments for anything that would vibrate, echo, or resonate. Just bone and quiet. This is the part that gives you chills, because even now, eons later, the absence feels deliberate. You haul up a digital reconstruction on your tablet. CT scans have turned this silent skull into a 3D model. You rotate it slowly, watching how the narrow tracheal channel winds down without expanding. That's the clincher. There's just nowhere for sound to build. The whole thing's like a wind instrument that ends before the note. And here's the authoritative historical fact of the day. Fossilized soft tissue remains from a Cretaceous dig in Mongolia included the first preserved syrinx, the avian vocal organ, in a duck-like dinosaur. That was revolutionary. It proved that at least some dinosaurs could sing like modern birds. But the A. mutus, it had no such luck. There's no syrinx, no resonance chamber, no evolutionary flirtation with music. Instead, its bones tell a different story, a story of quiet precision. The oddest part. In one of the better preserved skeletons, paleontologists discovered a partially fossilized stomach content remains of smaller theropods, which suggests something chilling. It hunted things that did make noise. You picture it like a mute musician walking into an orchestra, stealing a violin and vanishing before anyone noticed. There's a term you've come to use for this creature. Not officially, of course, just among the team. The listener. Because that's what it did. It listened. You scroll through excavation notes. One entry stands out, scribbled by a researcher known for poetic field logs. The bones speak differently. They aren't just mute, they seem tired of noise, as if their owner existed in protest. You smile, a little melodramatic, but maybe not wrong. Historians still debate whether this silence evolved in parallel to other species, or if it was inherited from an unknown ancestor that predated even the loudest carnivores. There's a camp that believes A. mutus came from a deep forest lineage where stealth was survival. Others say it emerged from a genetic bottleneck, one that erased the roar through sheer accident. No one agrees, but no one can ignore the implications. It makes you wonder how many other mute dinosaurs we've misclassified, assuming their bones meant roar because everyone else did. Maybe some never wanted to be heard. Maybe we've only been listening to the loudest. You look up from the fossils and let your eyes drift to the dry landscape around the dig site. Wind stirs the dust, whispering across ancient plains where herds once thundered. You imagine the Acceloraptor mutus walking through them. No calls, no commands, just presence. Odd fact, dolphins have names. They develop distinct signature whistles for each individual. But even in their world of endless chatter, they fall silent when hunting. They don't talk when it matters. And so you begin to imagine, what if silence wasn't a flaw? What if it was power? What if the listener didn't need a voice because everything else had one? You stand, stretch your back, and look down at the fossil again. Its mouth is open, just a little, caught mid-motion, like it wanted to say something but changed its mind. And you wonder, if it had, would we even believe it? You wade through mist like soup knees, brushing ferns, slick with dew and time. It's morning barely, and the jungle hasn't quite decided if it's awake yet, Ed. The light is pale and suspicious. You swear the leaves themselves are whispering, not because of the wind, but because they're used to being silent witnesses. This part of the forest is known to fossil hunters as the Hollow Basin. Not because it's empty, quite the opposite, but because it's unnaturally quiet. The local wildlife avoids it. Even the birds overhead detour around the canopy. You stop, breathe in, and realize there's no birdsong, just a deep, constant hush. There's a reason this basin matters. The sediment here is volcanic and fine-grained, perfect for preserving trace fossils, things that don't usually survive. Skin impressions, feather outlines, and most curiously, acoustic shadows. Yeah, that's a real term. In certain rare layers, the impressions of how creatures moved through space can be interpreted not just as trackways, but as sonic behavior. Footfall spacing, tail drag variance, stance width. It's how some paleontologists deduce whether a creature stomped or tiptoed. No sound preserved, but the effects of sound or the lack of it. Sometimes those remain. And here in Hollow Basin, Aceliraptor mutus trackways stretch clean for over 30 meters without deviation, no stutter steps, no lunges, just quiet, measured motion. Even its prints are strange too precise. No slips, no heavy landings, just calculated weight distribution. Almost like it knew it had to stay unnoticed even by the ground. There's a theory, one of those weird ones you're not supposed to take seriously unless it's after midnight, and someone's brought rum. It goes like this: the entire region had unique acoustic properties. The terrain dampened sound, the soft moss, the thick undergrowth, the moisture in the air. It was like the earth was eating noise, and Aceliraptor mutus evolved with it. Not around it. With it. Imagine that a predator sculpted by an environment that punished volume. No roars, no howls, just the hiss of breath through nostrils and the whisper of claws against bark. Odd fact, there's a species of owl that hunts above snowy fields using silence as a weapon. Their feathers are shaped to suppress flight noise. They don't flap, they drift. Their prey dies, never knowing what killed them. You imagine the A. mutus doing the same, drifting across the landscape like a sigh. You find a nest impression near a dried stream bed. Half oval, pressed shallow. It's old, filled in, but not trampled. You glance around, no heavy foot traffic, no signs of distress. Whatever made this nest didn't need to defend it. It wasn't found. You kneel, brushing away debris, and find a small jawbone nearby juvenile hadrosaur. Not scavenged, not shattered, just placed. And again, no teeth marks, no evidence of struggle. It was carried here, quietly. Historians still debate whether these creatures raise their young communally or abandon nests entirely. One camp argues that their silence made parenting impossible. No calls, no reassurance. Others say it fostered a stronger bond, one based on movement, scent, and pattern. Either way, the fossil trail suggests something intimate, purposeful. You step away from the nest and feel something odd. Not fear, not awe, reverence. Because the silence here isn't dead space. It's memory, preserved in atmosphere. The forest around you isn't just quiet, it's listening. And then you hear it. No, feel it. Not a sound, but the absence of one. A ripple in the hush. Something just passed through and everything around you reacts without moving. Ferns tighten. Insects still. Even the air seems to hold its breath. You catch a blur through the canopy. Too fast? Too smooth? A long tail, a narrow head, a flash of amber eyes. Gone. But you felt it. This is its territory, its cathedral, and you don't belong here. You take a step back, then another. Every movement feels like a sin. A crunch of leaf litter, a splash of muddy water. You're reminded again why this creature had no roar. Because in a place like this, silence is sound, and the one who controls it is king. You're alone now. At least you hope you are. The jungle behind you has sealed shut like a wound, erasing the path you took. The birds have resumed their chattering. Somewhere overhead, a pterosaur screeches just to prove that it exists. But up ahead, there's a different mood. It's quiet again. Not at the peaceful kind. The kind of quiet that makes your skin tighten, like the moment before a sneeze or a verdict. You inch forward, pushing aside thick leaves, careful not to step on anything that might snap. And that's when you see it, the aftermath. A scavenger lies dead near a rock face, likely a dromaeosaurid, smaller, scrappier, usually loud. Its body is twisted awkwardly. Eyes still open, mouth agape like it was halfway through an insult when something silenced it. No bite marks, no blood spray, just trauma. Neck broken, spine twisted. It didn't see it coming, which is kind of the point. The predator didn't roar, didn't growl, didn't bluff. It struck, and the forest didn't even blink. You circle the scene looking for signs of a struggle. There are none, just drag marks leading into the underbrush. The victim was light, maybe a juvenile, a snack. Not worth bragging about, which is lucky, because Acceloraptor mutus never bragged. It didn't need to. But it did have rivals. And not all of them were as quiet. You hear it before you see it, a heavy stomp, a wet snort. Then another, a pair of megaraptors, maybe cousins, maybe competitors. You press yourself low as their heads emerge through the vines, eyes, sharp nostrils flaring. They're looking for something, and they're not subtle. They're built for loud. They stomp to scare. They roar to assert. They slash bark from trees just to say, "I was here." And right now they smell the kill, but they can't find the killer. They hiss at each other. One swipes at a tree annoyed. The other grumbles low and presses its snout to the ground, sniffing like an angry dog. They don't know it yet, but they're being watched. By him. You see the shape behind them, still barely distinguishable from the shadows. No glowing eyes, no dramatic silhouette. Just a presence. A long tail slowly curling around a root. The Acceloraptor mutus is already there. Watching, calculating. And then it moves. You'd expect an ambush to come crashing through, screams, roars, chaos. But this is more like choreography. The A mutus darts and jaw snapping, only once, and vanishes again. The smaller megaraptor recoils, blood pouring from a new gash behind its thigh. No warning, no posturing. The forest reacts after the strike. The larger one spins, trying to roar, but it's too late. The silent one has already disappeared into the canopy, not even a branch swayed in his wake. Odd fact, cheetahs don't roar. Not really. They chirp, hiss, purr, but they don't have the equipment for a lion's thunder. Yet they're the fastest land predators alive. Sometimes speed and silence are all you need. And A mutus. It didn't run like a cheetah. It flowed like one. Historians still debate whether this particular species ever engaged in direct conflict with its kin. Some point to healed wounds on specimens suggesting occasional territorial clashes. Others argue that these injuries came from prey or accidents. But no fossilized roars, no echoing claims to dominance, just scars. You watch as the injured megaraptor limps away, still barking into the trees, trying to find something that left no scent and no sound. The survivor remains uneasy, circling, sniffing, snapping at shadows. But the danger is already gone. Because the silent predator never lingers. It doesn't need to. You remember a quote from an old field journal, a half-joke, half-warning written in the margin of a sketch. Predators with roars want to be feared. The ones without want to be forgotten. And that's what A mutus was. Not a terror, not a monster, but a myth in motion. A story whispered by the bones of its rivals. You exhale slowly, barely making a sound. You've never felt so loud before. Your own breath feels like a betrayal. Your heartbeat like a drum. And every step you take from here will feel like you're marching through someone else's church. Because this isn't just a hunting ground. It's a stage. And the predator that never growled, it's the only one that doesn't need applause. It happens in an incident. A moment so small, it could slip between blinks. You hear nothing. That's how you know something terrible is coming. The jungle is normally a concert of background noise, chirps, groans, humming, insects, trickling water, the casual domestic chaos of a Cretaceous ecosystem. But today, there's not a whisper. You could mistake it for a moment of peace, but it's not. You step onto a ridge overlooking a small basin where a herd of Lielanosaura, nervous, fast-moving herbivores, gather around a patch of low shrubs. They make soft, squeaky calls to each other like rubber toys losing confidence. Juveniles peek from under parental tails. Everything about the scene says safe for now, until it isn't. You don't hear the warning, because there wasn't one. Suddenly the forest convulses. The herd panics not from sound, but from motion. One of the adults jerks, then topples neck bent at a wrong angle. Others stumble backward in confusion. You scan the tree line, heart pounding, trying to locate the attacker. And then you see it. The Acceloraptor mutus had already been there. Already chosen its target. Already killed. No roar to mark its strike. No screech of triumph. Just the confused silence of prey that didn't get a chance to flee. The rest bolt, but they don't go far. They're too bewildered. The attack made no noise. Their instincts are screaming run, but their ears don't know why. It's the strangest thing without sound to signal danger. Their herd cohesion breaks down. Instead of a unified stampede, there's just a scattered mess of panicked zigzags. One of the juveniles runs straight into the underbrush alone. Wrong move. A shadow darts again. The raptor doesn't even pause to eat. Just disables, drops, vanishes. 2 kills in under a minute. No noise. No blood-curdling growl. It doesn't even pant. You crouch stunned. Not just at the violence, but at the efficiency. This is what silence costs. A warning cry could have saved that herd. One alarm call, one shriek, and the jungle would have flared to life. The prey would have surged together, defenders flanking the young, the raptor, driven off by numbers alone. But silence denied them all that. Odd fact, prairie dogs have specific warning calls for different predators. One sound for hawks, another for snakes, even different ones for fast versus slow-moving humans. It's basically a spoken security system. But take the sound away and the system collapses. So what happens in a world where the predator never gives you that signal? You die confused. Historians still debate the broader effects of silent predation on Cretaceous ecology. Some argue that animals in regions with A. mutus developed alternative defense mechanisms. Tighter herding behavior, increased sensitivity to vibrations. Others say the silence created evolutionary dead zones, areas where nothing adapted fast enough to survive. One idea proposed at a symposium in Sao Paulo suggests that the extinction of several small herbivore lineages in Patagonia wasn't due to climate shifts or competition, but because they evolved near a predator that didn't play by the acoustic rules. They had no time to adapt. You creep down into the basin, heart thudding. The carcasses are still fresh. The air smells metallic and green. But the Acceloraptor is gone. No bones crunched. No warning snarl to scare you away. Just stillness. Again. You study the remains, necks broken, cleanly, bodies undisturbed. Not even dragged. Not feeding behavior. Just tactical elimination. You feel the implication slide over you like fog. It didn't kill for food. It killed to clear the board, to collapse the herd, to make the others easier to pick off. That's the terrifying part. Not that it was strong, or fast, or sharp, but that it was cold, strategic. You step back unsettled as the jungle begins to breathe again. One by one the sounds return, birds, insects, distant creatures, like a stage crew setting the scenery after a blackout. But it all feels faker now, fragile, because you know how easily it can be stolen. You walk away trying not to make noise, as if your own sound might attract it. But it's not listening. It already knows where you are. You sit on a half-buried log notebook in hand, but it's mostly for show. There's nothing to write that would make sense. You've seen it too many times now, the attack, the eerie aftermath, the ghosting departure, and always the same thing, missing a sound. Not even a hiss, not a cough. Nothing but the rustle of disturbed plants in the wake of something already gone. You tap your pen against the page, remembering the first time you heard the phrase, adaptive silence. It came from a grizzled paleobiologist with more field scars than vertebrae. He'd whispered it like a confession over a campfire flickering against tent walls. There are fossils that say things we can't prove. But I swear to you, some creatures thrived by refusing to speak. And Acceloraptor mutus. It's the poster child for that theory. But here's the thing. Not everyone agrees. Historians still debate the cause of the silence. Some insist it was anatomical, a genetic lottery ticket that stripped away sound-producing features. Others argue it was environmental. Those that made less noise simply survived longer in their habitat, leading to a slow generational mute button. Then there's the fringe camp. The ones who say it wasn't silence at all, but communication so low, so foreign, we just can't hear it. That maybe, just maybe, a mutus had frequencies outside our fossil record, outside human comprehension. Infrasound vibrations, ultrasonic pulses, like the way elephants talk through the soles of their feet. Odd fact, tarsiers, those freaky wide-eyed primates, can vocalize at frequencies so high that they're literally inaudible to us. They scream all the time. We just can't hear it. Scientists only figured this out in the last couple decades. Which begs the uncomfortable question, what if this dinosaur wasn't silent? What if we were just never invited to the conversation? You chew your lip replaying every encounter. The times the jungle froze. The moments when prey animals scattered without any visual cue. The way even large predators paused mid-roar, eyes darting at nothing. Was that instinct? Or was it something whispered below the threshold of sound? You flip through your field notes, pausing at an entry from 3 days ago, those twin juvenile hadrosaurs that collapsed mid-graze. No visible injuries, no chase. Just one moment eating the next, lying in the dirt. Eyes wide, legs twitching. The cause of death. Cardiac arrest. From fear, the team guessed. But fear of what? And how did it arrive without them ever looking up? The answer might lie in one of the least examined specimens, half forgotten in a Chilean museum basement. An old cast of a partial skull fragment with odd mineral buildup in the cranial cavities. Back then, researchers wrote it off as sediment distortion. But what if it wasn't? What if it was a structure we hadn't recognized, a resonator of some kind? Not for sound outward, but inward. A mechanism to manipulate internal pressure or direct vibration. Too sci-fi for some, sure. But when you're dealing with the past, everything sounds like science fiction. You close the notebook and stand. There's movement ahead just past the creek bend where moss dangles like damp curtains. A small theropod, maybe a juvenile unenlagine, pecks at a bush, oblivious. You hear it before it sees it. Not a noise, a change. In the air. The rhythm. The way the world holds its breath. The Acceloraptor steps from the trees. The juvenile spots it, flares its neck in a frantic display, hissing, squeaking, stamping tiny feet. It's a fire alarm in a feathered package. The predator doesn't flinch, doesn't rush. It simply locks eyes and waits. And the other one stops. Not because it has given up, but because somehow something inside it tells it there's no point. Like it's already over. And maybe it is. The silent one lunges, one bite, done, no scream, just a soft crack that sounds like a pine cone falling from a tree. You exhale, a long, slow breath. Because this isn't a predator that lacks a roar. It's a predator that never needed one. And maybe that's worse. You can't sleep. Not just because the jungle is alive and insistent, every shadow twitching, every breeze sounding suspiciously like footfall, but because your brain won't stop rewinding. Over and over again, it replays the absence, the attacks you didn't hear, the predator you never caught in the act, only in the consequence. Tonight you've taken shelter near the edge of a marshland, where the trees squat low and the soil is soft as sponge cake. You thought maybe the frogs would keep you company. You were wrong. The frogs are losing their minds. It starts with chirps, then bellows, then a full-on amphibian opera, each species trying to outvolume the others. It's chaos, but in a good way. A kind of primal celebration. You begin to relax, thinking maybe the silent one wouldn't dare intrude on all this. And that's when it happens. A shift. Not a loud one, but a noticeable one. The frogs fall silent. Not all at once, more like a cascade, each chorus dropping out in a domino of unease. Then something else starts, a sound you don't recognize. It's not a voice, not an animal call, but a pattern, a pulse, throatier than wind, higher than tremors. It's a texture, not a tone, like the air itself is breathing in dots and dashes. You whip your head around trying to place it. It's not constant, it's in waves, and it's getting closer. That's when the swamp comes alive, not with a roar, but with reactions. Reeds sway without breeze. A flock of anurognathed pterosaurs erupt from the canopy, wheeling into the moonlight like leaves in a firestorm. Then a shape emerges from the water, but not the one you expect. It's not Acceloraptor mutus this time. It's something weirder. A quadruped amphibian the size of a small horse covered in loose algae-draped skin and oozing menace. It lurches onto land with a low, warbling hum that reverberates through your chest cavity like a bad decision in audio form. This thing is loud. It burbles, croaks, groans like a dying tuba. And the noise is physically painful. Everything else scatters, except the silence, and the one who commands it. Because there at the marsh's edge stands a mutus, just watching. The loud creature sees it and doesn't stop making noise. It doubles down, shrieking now, water-rippling echo bouncing across trees. But the silent one doesn't react. It just steps forward. One pace, two, then everything stops. The amphibian, so bold a second ago, sinks lower, deflates like a balloon, losing its reason to exist. It backs away, and then slinks into the swamp without another note. A Coeluraptor mutus doesn't chase it. It doesn't need to. You blink stunned, because it just won a confrontation without ever making a sound. Odd fact, elephants in myth. Those hormone-fueled, testosterone-jacked episodes sometimes face off without touching or trumpeting. They posture, vibrate, there. The loser walks away defeated by intent. Was that what you just saw? A clash of energy. Historians still debate the presence of bioacoustic dominance among prehistoric animals. Whether some species could overwhelm others simply through pressure waves, muscle vibration, or ultrasonic posture. Most dismiss it as fringe theory. But how else do you explain what just happened? You scribble madly in your notebook, trying to capture the nuance of the moment. But every word feels flat, like trying to describe a dream using sidewalk chalk. The frogs return eventually, hesitant, off-key. You don't blame them. Their entire ecosystem just witnessed something ancient and terrifying, a contest of noise, and the one who made none won. You realize now the story isn't just about the dinosaur whose roar was never heard. It's about everything that was and how it didn't matter. Because silence didn't mean weakness. It meant mastery. The sun is barely up, but the air is already thick, one of those slow, syrupy mornings where sound doesn't travel far. You're crouched near a low bluff, staring down at something you didn't expect to find in this part of the basin. A nest. More precisely, what's left of one. It's subtle, like everything else tied to Acceloraptor mutus. No great mound, no open bowl of branches and eggs. Just a depression in the ground, shielded by thick ferns and camouflaged with a layer of damp moss. A fossil imprint revealed it last week. Fragile eggshell fragments, claw marks, and the outline of a curled tail. And nearby a trail of footprints, small ones, hatchlings. This section of the story, it's different. You always imagined predator parenting in the prehistoric world to be loud. Roars, bellows, frantic warnings when danger drew near. But A. mutus, the fossil evidence says otherwise. There's no vocal architecture for warning cries, no throat sac to hum lullabies, which means if this mother defended her young, she did it without ever making a sound. Imagine that, a mother's mute cry. You kneel closer to the nest site. One hatchling print 3 tiny toes points toward the forest's edge. Then, nothing. No drag marks, no predator tracks, just absence. Either it made it all or it didn't. Either way, the record is silent. There's an eerie kind of reverence in that. Odd fact crocodiles today hum to their young, not roars vibrations. A mother can trigger hatching by singing near her eggs. Remove that sound and the hatching can fail. So how did this mother do it? One theory is that she used warmth and timing, nest placement, subtle movements, body vibration. Scientists have discovered that even turtles can sense seismic vibrations while in the egg. What if these hatchlings could feel her message, stay low, stay still? Wait, historians still debate whether A. mutus females parented beyond nesting. Some suggest they simply laid eggs and moved on. But here's the part that throws shade on that idea. One nest site found in the southern basin had adult-sized tracks circling the nest paced regularly for at least 3 days. It wasn't passing by. It was staying nearby. Guarding. Not loudly, just present. And maybe that's enough. You sit down against a tree notebook on your lap thinking back to one particular fossil. A juvenile A. mutus, not even half-grown. Its bones were partially fused, indicating it had lived longer than most hatchlings typically survived. And nearby, a larger skeleton. Same species, protective posture. The two died close together, perhaps even side by side. There were no signs of violent trauma, just the quiet finality of being buried in the same flood, a mute lineage. Silently passed down. It makes you wonder what other forms of communication you've overlooked. The rustling of leaves, the blink of an eye, the flick of a tail. And still, you keep returning to that nest. How many times have you seen nesting behavior among predators, and it's always a chaotic affair, snarling mothers, screeching young, constant noise, to remind the jungle not to come close. But here, there's no noise, and no scent. Even now, thousands of years later, the nest feels protected not by force but by absence. Like the jungle still hasn't realized what was here. You stare up at the canopy and picture her, this mute mother curled protectively around her eggs, aware that sound invites attention. Aware that she must be all things shelter, warmth, warning without the one tool every other parent seems to need. How do you tell your young to run without a voice? How do you teach them to survive in a world that listens for weakness? Maybe by teaching them how to disappear. The jungle around you begins to stir, low calls, insects waking, distant mammals chirping for territory. But in this grove, there's still a hush. Because here silence wasn't danger, it was devotion. Night again. And this time, you're not waiting for the roar. You're waiting for the absence of it. You lie flat on a ridge overlooking the valley floor, a wide open stretch that was once a riverbed, now cracked dry and veined with old mudlines. The sky above is thick with stars and the air feels like it's holding its breath. The calls of nocturnal creatures rise like static, echoing off the cliffs in 100 chaotic directions. But then, a tremor. Subtle at first, just a shift under your ribs, then another stronger. And another. It's not a creature, not a roar. It's the earth. A low rumble rolls across the valley. You recognize the signs as seismic event. Minor maybe, but enough to stir the land into a nervous twitch. Rocks tumble from a far slope. A tree splits somewhere below. The air quivers. Birds rise too late to avoid the aftershock. The sound is massive, thunderous, but natural. And yet, something feels different. As the quake fades, silence takes over. Not the usual anticipatory kind, but a deep, resonant vacuum, like the world is waiting for a reply. You hear it before you see it, not a voice but a rhythm, not sound but motion. There, silhouetted against the moonlit fog, strides a Raptor mutus, not sprinting, not hunting, just walking. And with each step the ground pulses, The impact isn't loud, but it travels. You feel it in your fingertips, your chest, your teeth. A thump so low it doesn't register as noise-only sensation. And you realize something astonishing. This is the echo, not of a roar, of presence. The quake didn't disturb the raptor. It summoned it. Some theorists, usually the ones no one wants to sit next to at conferences, believe A. mutus didn't just survive in seismic zones. It adapted to them, used the quakes as cover, or even as cues. Odd fact, elephants can detect distant storms through their feet. They orient their movements toward or away from subterranean rumbles. Even wind changes deep in the soil can alter migration paths. So what if this creature evolved not to fear tremors but to respond to them? You watch as it descends into the valley, slow, graceful, like it's floating. And for the first time you notice its tail barely touches the ground. Each step lands with perfect control, like it's been trained not to wake a sleeping god. Then it stops, and the ground, still rippling from the earlier quake, seems to speak back. It's hard to describe. A single stone clacks against another. A tree creaks unnaturally. A chorus of distant calls the jungle's other inhabitants rise, fall, then cut out again. And in that broken rhythm, something becomes clear. Aceliraptor mutus doesn't need to make noise. The world makes it for him. Historians still debate this concept, echo mapping. The idea that some ancient species used ambient sound as a kind of sonar, not by producing it, but by interpreting the chaos of their environment. Every crack of wood, every splash, every tremor became a signal, a way to read the world without speaking to it. The quake tonight. It lit up the valley like a drumhead, and the silent predator, he played it. You see him pause near a downed tree. A smaller predator, a scavenger, sniffs nervously at a carcass nearby. The raptor doesn't lunge, doesn't need to. Instead, he shifts his weight just slightly, one deliberate step. The ground beneath him compresses, sends a vibration outward. Not violent, just enough. The scavenger bolts, yelping into the dark. The carcass remains untouched, because the only voice used here was pressure. And pressure speaks louder than volume. You exhale slowly, overwhelmed by the subtle choreography you're witnessing. A predator that manipulates not just flesh and fang, but the land itself. Oddly poetic, isn't it? A creature that never roared yet still echoes. You stay long after he's gone, watching the last shivers of the earth die down. And in the quiet afterward, you realize something that chills you more than the quake. This dinosaur didn't evolve without sound. It transcended it. There's a stillness now that you didn't expect. Not the usual kind that comes before a kill or after a tremor, but the kind that stretches longer than it should. It feels final. Like something's missing and the jungle hasn't figured out how to fill the gap. You follow the dry riverbed one last time past the shattered logs, the fossilized nest sites, the footpaths worn thin from silent repetition. And then just beyond the bend you see it. The bones. Not scattered, not ravaged, just there. Still whole but weathered. The ribs are angled slightly as though the creature had laid down only once and never got back up. The skull is half buried in sediment, jaws ajar, as if it finally tried to speak, but no sound came. This is the last Aceliraptor mutus, or at least the last anyone's found. It died alone. No sign of conflict, no tooth marks, no predators circling, just an ancient solitary passing. And in some strange way that fits. Of course it would go out this way. Without a roar, without a cry for help, just silence. You step closer. A part of you expected some final message, a scratch in the dirt, a leftover nest. But there's nothing. The jungle has already begun reclaiming it, vines curling through vertebrae, moss softening its outline. Historians still debate what led to its disappearance. Was it climate competition? Or did silence finally meet its match in a world that got louder and louder? One theory stands out. That as the Earth changed warmer days, noisier species, evolving communication. A. Mutus lost its edge. Stealth only works when others aren't built to see through it. And as the jungle grew smarter, louder, more reactive, the once perfect strategy of absence began to fail. Odd fact, in the modern world, silence is rare in nature. Even the deep sea hums. Even glaciers groan. Silence doesn't evolve anymore. It's filtered out. Maybe that's what happened here. You kneel beside the skeleton, brush away a layer of dust. Beneath the rib cage, tucked where a heart once beat, is something small, a pebble maybe, or a fossilized tendon knot. You pick it up. It crumbles in your hand. Whatever it was, it didn't last. But the shape of the creature lingers in your mind. Its posture, its stillness, its refusal to shout, the way it made the world quieter just by walking through it. You stand looking out over the basin. The birds are back to screaming. Insects rattle. A pair of juvenile ceratopsians screech at each other like toddlers with horns. The world has returned to volume. But you remember when it wasn't. You remember the quiet and the shadow that moved through it. You start walking, leaving the bones behind. No need to mark the spot. The jungle will do what it always does. Bury the evidence. Grow over the silence. Turn memory into myth. But as you go, a final thought sneaks in, one that hits harder than the fossils, harder than any theory. There was never a roar, so there was never a goodbye. Just a long, quiet exit no one noticed. Until now. You return to the surface world, airports. Car horns, phone notifications, footsteps on tile, but something's shifted in you. After weeks surrounded by things that never spoke, everything here feels abrasive. The world is too loud now. You pause outside the museum where the Oceliraptor mutus cast is being installed. A full reconstruction skeletal replica, hyper-detailed musculature overlay, museum-safe colors. The label calls it the silent predator. Tourists pass by without slowing. Kids tug their parents toward the louder exhibits, roaring robotic rexes, screeching theropods programmed to perform. A speaker box plays loops of carnivore cries. It's all very animated. No one stops at the quiet one. Except you, and one other. A paleobotanist in a tattered field jacket stands with arms crossed, frowning at the model. They gave it teeth like a movie villain, he mutters. Should have given it a shadow. You smile. You both know they missed the point. It wasn't the teeth, it was the quiet. Back home, you fall into a strange habit. Watching animals that don't make noise. Lizards, owls, even goldfish. You start tuning into the silences between sounds. The moments that conversations dip. The pause before thunder. Odd fact, jellyfish are deaf. They don't perceive sound at all. Yet they've survived for over 500 million years. Floaters, drifters, mute empires. You look again at the fossils. You trace your fingers along the digit impressions. And you begin to see the outlines of modern creatures in them, not physically but behaviorally. Coyotes that avoid barking unless it's absolutely necessary. Cats that stare instead of shout. Octopuses that vanish in ink and never explain why. The DNA of Oceliraptor mutus might be gone, but its strategy, its stillness echoes. You think back to that ridgeline at dusk, the shape in the trees, the way your breath caught not because of what you heard, but because of what you didn't. You realize now this wasn't just a predator with a missing voice. It was a creature that lived entirely in the negative space, and we almost missed it. Historians still debate the legacy of silence. Can it leave a mark? Can it outlive volume? Can something that never cried out be remembered? You already know the answer. Because here you are, still listening. The forest is gone now. In its place, city light sidewalks, glass towers, and the low, ever-present hum of electricity. And yet even here you sometimes feel it the pull of something quiet, moving just beyond reach. You sit in the museum's back archive room late at night, flipping through sketchbooks and scan reports. Almatish Mruech Oids. Somewhere above a janitor's radio murmurs, barely audible. In your hands, the last page of your field journal. You draw it. Not the bones, not the teeth, not the kills, just the space it occupied. A gap in the soundscape, an outline where no noise belonged. You think about everything the world remembers. Dinosaurs are all about spectacle, sharp teeth, loud jaws, thunderous chases, documentaries loop roars that never existed. Museums pump in artificial growls. The myth of sound lingers even where it never was. But Aceliraptor mutus, it never wanted to be heard. And maybe that was the brilliance of it. Odd fact in space, no one can hear you scream. Not because sound doesn't exist, but because there's nothing to carry it. The medium matters. Noise needs permission, silence does not. You remember the others, you tracked the ones that sang their power. Their skeletons were found broken, shattered in the very places they tried to claim. But his bones, intact, curled as if in rest, as if the very act of not announcing himself gave him permission to last longer than them all. Historians still debate whether Aceliraptor mutus died out or simply faded hidden in the fossil record beneath louder legacies. But maybe extinction isn't always a bang. Maybe it's just a hush that stretches a little too long. You place the journal down, your pen quiet now. The lights hum softly. You listen for the thing that isn't there. And in that absence, you finally understand. The dinosaur whose roar was never heard was never meant to be. In the thick, roaring jungles of the Cretaceous where every creature fought for dominance with fang claw, and voice one predator thrived not by shouting, but by staying utterly, completely silent. Aceliraptor mutus, the dinosaur whose roar was never heard, walked a different evolutionary path. Without vocal cords, without a resonating chamber, without even the instinct to growl, it became a master of presence. It didn't hunt with noise, but with timing, with stillness, with reverence for shadows. It could stalk entire herds without triggering panic, strike without warning, raise its young without a sound. Even among its rivals, the absence of a roar wasn't a weakness, it was a weapon. Over time, it adapted not to be seen or heard, but felt a ripple in the soil, a break in the rhythm of sound. Fossils whispered what it never did, a throat unequipped for sound, bones shaped for stealth patterns in the dirt that told stories without volume. As the world grew louder, this creature's quiet dominance faded. Not in violence, not in fire, but like a breath, exhaled into time. And now, as we dig, as we reconstruct, as we listen with the wrong ears, we begin to hear it at last. Not in roars, but in echoes.